I want to start here in 2nd Ezra 13. This is what's gonna bring a lot of things to our attention. All right, because I don't want to miss out on. I don't want people to forget the thought. We are in the Persian time period, the Persian Empire, right? So that's about 500 years before Christ and on up, as far as like into the 400s and 300s of years before Christ. So as we've been going through Ezra, what we've been noticing, like I'll read here in Ezra 1, where Cyrus made the decree that Israelites could go back to the land to rebuild the temple. We saw that it was only the Jews. It was only Judah, Benjamin, and Levi who went up primarily. And I'll read this right here, where it says in Ezra 1 and verse 5, once Cyrus made the decree, it said, "Then rose up the chief of the fathers of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, with all them whose spirit God had raised to go up to build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem." So notice what it said. It said Judah, Benjamin, and the priests with the Levites. All right, so Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, that's only 3 of the 12 tribes. Plus it said with all them whose spirit God had raised to go up to build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. So there was a remnant of the rest of the tribes, but it didn't mention the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, Gad, Reuben, Simeon, and the rest. It didn't mention all of those tribes. All right. Just so nobody feels left out, Asher, Naphtali, Issachar, Zebulun. It didn't mention none of those tribes. That's my point. Or Dan. It didn't mention any of those tribes. And again, we'll check the records. We'll check the records in Nehemiah, because we know that the records in Ezra and Nehemiah are pretty much the same. They're talking about the same time period. So when you go to Nehemiah 11, it said when Nehemiah is recording, or rather when he's going through the records of the people who came back to Jerusalem, in verse 3 here in Nehemiah 11, he said, "Now these are the chief of the province that dwelt in Jerusalem, but in the cities of Judah dwelt everyone in his possession in their cities, to wit, Israel." And then he starts listing the priests and the Levites and the Nethinims and the children of Solomon's servants. So the Nethinims would be temple servants, and obviously it says the children of Solomon's servants. "And at Jerusalem dwelt certain of the children of Judah and of the children of Benjamin." And then it starts to list the families of Judah and Benjamin and the priests, and the Levites, of course. But then it doesn't ever go into listing the families of Ephraim, the families of Manasseh, the families of Simeon, Gad, Reuben, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali. It doesn't list, or Dan, it doesn't list these families. So where did these families go? Ezra knew where they went because he saw it in a vision. All right. In 2nd Ezra 13 and verse 39, when the angel is explaining to him the vision, "And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king," right? And we read about that in when we was going into the last Northern Kingdom kings. Hosea was the last Northern Kingdom king. Let me just make sure all my frame rates are right and all that. It appears to be. Oh, now it's dipping into yellow, so you make it a little choppy. We make it a little choppy here, but please bear with me. All right. It said, "Whom Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, so came they into another land," right? In the Assyrian captivity. All right. Verse 41, "But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt." So when Ezra and Judah, Benjamin, and Levi as a whole were counseling on how they would go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, you had the 10 tribes, the tribes that I just mentioned: Ephraim, Manasseh, Reuben, Gad, Simeon, Asher, Naphtali, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dan. They got together and said, "You know what? Let's go into that other country where never mankind dwelt." All right. And here's the point, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. So that the original thought was to, once we get away from these heathen, we can start keeping the commandments and righteousness. That was the thought. All right. It didn't stay like that forever, but that was the original thought. And it even gives you the route. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow path places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over, right? Because you had a lot of people who tried to cross over. A lot of Europeans tried to cross over the Atlantic during the Middle Ages, but they could never really pass over. Not most of them could not. And you see that on the old maps represented by people drawing sea monsters, right? Because when people get shipwrecked, it was either, something like a sea monster, or it was like a storm, and people, create tales about that. So they say those are dangerous waters. Let's put a sea monster there so people know that's dangerous waters. All right. But guess what? God made it to where these 10 boats or these 10 families of ships could come over. All right. For through that country, there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years. So it took 1.5 years to get over here. All right. And the same region is called Arsareth. Now, Arsareth is very interesting. All right. Arsareth is key here. All right. I see the frame rates are down, so please bear with me. Y'all might see stuff falling off. Oh yeah, that frame rate's not good right there. Let me make sure everything's still going smooth while I pull up this Arsareth. Bear with me for a second. Let me make sure things are going smooth while I pull up this Arsareth. Where are we at? Where are we at? Trying to find this Arsareth on here, but also trying to make sure everything going smooth. Bear with me for 1 minute. Got that Arsareth. Let's see how things are going. Okay. It would appear things are all right. For a second. It would appear things are going okay, at least for the time being. All right, so I'm gonna bring this back down. All right, so as you can see here, the Arsareth. All right, Arsareth. I hope y'all can see that right there. It says, the name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the laws of Moses until the time of the restoration, according to 4th Esdras 13 and 45. Now, 2nd Esdras in the King James Bible is sometimes referred to as 4th Esdras. All right. Because you have the book of Ezra and Nehemiah in the Bible, and then you have 1st Esdras and 2nd Esdras in the Apocrypha. All right, so it's sometimes referred to as 4th Esdras. And it said Columbus identified America with this land, and they even have a reference to a book where there's Kaiserling wrote Christopher Columbus. All right, but the point is Columbus knew. Oh, it's Israelites over there. That's why he brought a Hebrew translator named Luis de Torres. All right. And people think that it's just a coincidence that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, the same year of the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition expelled all Jews from Spain. All right. People think that's a coincidence. It's not. They were attacking the Israelites on 2 fronts. All right. King Ferdinand, that devil in Spain. All right. Same as Columbus. Had that idea to attack the Israelites. But anyway, Arsareth was identified as the Americas. All right. Columbus knew. He said, oh, wait, y'all trying to go to India, but I know that there's Israelites over there across that Atlantic Ocean. All right. And he said, that's Arsareth over there. All right. So then dwelt they there until the latter time. So God's telling you, look, the 10 tribes gonna be in Arsareth until the last days. All right. And now when they shall begin to come, and it talks about us returning to the Lord. All right. So with that comes a lot of artifacts that prove such a thing. All right. Now, I don't have the book with me, But this book right here, Feats and Wisdom of the Ancients. I did a video a long time ago called Where Are the Lost Tribes of Israel and How Did They Get There? All right. So keep in mind, I ain't going to pull this up. Keep in mind, I'm reading from this book, page 118. We're about to get into it.
Published by Time Life Books. This is page 118. Phoenicians in America? That's the name of the question. Of the top of it.
Right. So page 118 of Feats and Wisdom of the Ancients, published by Time Life Books. All right. It's a good book to have when going into archaeology and things like that.
It says, "We are the sons of Canaan from Sidon," begins the manuscript. It is written in a Phoenician language used some 500 years before the birth of Christ. So, see, that's heavy right there, because the Phoenician language, at least the Phoenician written language, is the same script as the Paleo-Hebrew.
Right. So and this is no surprise to you if you've been following along with Bible History 101, the Israelite-Phoenician connection. All right. The Israelites and the Phoenicians shared an alphabet. All right. Before the Israelites went into captivity and started writing in a more Assyrian-style text, they wrote in the same script as the Phoenicians did. All right. And from that Phoenician script, not only comes your Greek language, all right, because the Greeks didn't have a written language until the Phoenicians and the Israelites, the Israelite-Phoenician connection, showed up on the Greek islands. From that came your Latin script, and from Latin script came your Spanish, came your English, came your French, all of that.
Meaning before it was influenced by Assyrian type. And it says around 500 years before Christ. That would have been around the time they would have got over here. Because remember, they would have been freed around 515 BC.
Right. So the 70 years that Jeremiah had prophesied was from around 587, 586 BC to around 517, 516, 515 BC, around that time.
Or they would have been freed around 517 BC. Around 515, maybe they took the council and maybe they got provisions together to get over here by 500 BC. And I don't necessarily even trust the translation that they give on this, that we're the sons of Canaan from Sidon. Because, I mean, maybe they just knew that they had, or that they could write in the Canaanite script, the Phoenician script or whatever, and they actually wrote that. But it's probably something along the lines of, we are from the land of Canaan. In only 8 lines, it tells a story of a voyage around Africa. So that's why I have this first line. That's why I have this line that goes around the bottom of Africa right here. The voyage around Africa of storm, human sacrifice, and salvation on the shores of what is now Brazil. And as you see right here, the shores of Brazil is where I have it landed. So they already know these right here. They already know this type of stuff. The historians know the scriptures. They know that it is the truth. You read on down.
Yeah, so if you try to look into these things and some of the artifacts that I'm going to bring up here, I only got one more artifact that I want to touch on, because I'm not getting into all the artifacts. There are so many different artifacts, and that's for a different time. I'm not even trying to display all the artifacts that are found throughout history. I'm just trying to demonstrate the proofs that the people who come over here from, as the route that we're showing on this map here, from around Africa on into Brazil, into the easternmost part of Brazil. All right. And as the scripture said, they entered into the Euphrates. All right. So that's why I got the thing starting right here. All right. But if you look into these artifacts, one of the first things you're going to find is going to say hoax. All right. Into any of these artifacts, because anything that is outside the mainstream archaeology, anything that is outside the mainstream story of history, anything that is not going along with what the world says, they're going to try to debunk it. They're going to try to do all they can to try to discredit it. All right.
You read that it they found it near Brazil's easternmost tip. That's why I have it around right here. And then I'm jumping on down to a different paragraph. It says, then Cyrus Gordon, an American scholar of Semitic languages, studied the text and declared it to be authentic. So this isn't a hoax. This is
You see that right there? So in Feats and Wisdom of the Ancients, published by Time Life Books, they let you know, look, Cyrus Gordon, he's a language historian. He declared that it was authentic. He declared that it was not a hoax. So people talking about, oh, it's a hoax. It's just they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know about they don't know what the scholars know. I'll put it like that. They're just trying to discredit this information. All right.
Authentic, according to their archaeologists, their historians, blah blah blah. We don't need that. We have the scriptures, but this is just to solidify what the scriptures already say.
Right, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this video. And again, this is this book right here, Feats and Wisdom of the Ancients, declares the passage that I was just reading. All right, so from there, let's talk a little bit about the Los Lunas Dialogue Stone, or Decalogue, I should say, Decalogue Stone. Decalogue means 10 writings or 10 commandments. All right, so in New Mexico, in Los Lunas, New Mexico, because again, we just touched on the Paraiba Stone, which was in the easternmost part of Brazil. That's where the initial ships touched down. All right. That's where the initial ships with the 10 tribes touched down. All right. And then eventually they made their way up on ships, somebody walking, because America was connected by then, but also through ships to the islands, and after the islands on into America. All right, the United States. All right, so here you have the stone. It's at the in New Mexico. It's in Los Lunas, New Mexico, around the base of a mountain there. All right, and so this is showing, I don't know if you recognize this, but this is Paleo Hebrew script. All right, and let's touch on this right here. As you can see, it says, I am Yahweh, or Jehovah, your God, who has taken you out of the land. It says, not there be gods other before my face, as in there should not be no other gods before me. And then it goes into, it says, of Egypt from house of slaves, not shall make you idle, not take, right? So this is in Hebrew language. And obviously the grammar is going to be different from the English language. But the point is, this is the 10 commandments that's written out. All right. This is the 10 commandments that's written out. All right. So I got here on Google Maps, Los Lunas. All right. So this is Los Lunas. It's Los Lunas, New Mexico. As you can see, just south. And as you can see here, it follows the Rio Grande. All right. Wonder if y'all can see this. Yes, the Rio Grande. You see this down here? Los Lunas is on the Rio Grande, all right? Or Rio Grande, some may say. So Los Lunas is up here, all right? So zoom out. You still see Los Lunas. And this is in New Mexico, all right? And it follows the Rio Grande. Get out of here. It's just south of Albuquerque, so you can understand for reference. For a place of reference. So you see Los Lunas. As I'm zooming out, you still see Los Lunas. And follow the Rio Grande down. If you follow the Rio Grande down, it goes to the south of Texas. That's the border. That's the border between Texas and Mexico, is this Rio Grande right here. All right. So you have the Rio Grande, and it deposits right here in the Gulf of Mexico. So for the people, for the Gadites who were traveling up on boats into the Gulf of Mexico, if they followed up the river, it would only make sense that when they touched down, it would be somewhere around Los Lunas. All right. So I'm going to exit out of both of these. Let's get back to the scripture. All right. Los Lunas stone. Keep that in mind. They wrote the 10 commandments about where they would have touched down. All right. That specific tribe, the Gadite tribe. All right. So here in Deuteronomy 6, I'm going to start with verse 1. All right. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that ye might do them in the land whither ye go to possess it. You see that right there? So he said, these are the commandments. And if you read Deuteronomy 5, Moses is just recalling the 10 commandments. All right. Remember, that's what the Los Lunas stone has inscribed on it, the 10 commandments. And here you see in Deuteronomy 5, as it says, the 10 commandments. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. You see that right there? It goes into not making idols. And you got all the 10 commandments here. All right. So when you get to chapter 6, he said, these are the commandments, that you might do them in the land whether you go to possess it. Right. So as you jump down to verse 9, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. You see that right there? So that's why when they went into the land, they said, look, we have to write these commandments down if this is going to be our land, so that we can remember the commandments of God. All right. That's what they did. And again, people going to try to call the Los Lunas commandments a hoax. But the people who discovered that didn't know what language it was in. The people who, by people, I mean like the American settlers who went over there and saw the Los Lunas 10 Commandments for the first time. They didn't know what it was. They just assumed it was some Indian language. They didn't know that it was Paleo-Hebrew. And that's what you discover whenever you look into these artifacts that were found written in Hebrew, like the Back Creek Stone, like the 10 Commandments on the little Moses artifact up in Ohio. There's dozens of these artifacts that they found that had Paleo-Hebrew, and 9 times out of 10, the first people who see it don't even know what it is. Again, they just assume it's some Indian language. They don't know that it's the Hebrew. All right. So we see that it's a commandment from God to write these things on your on the posts of your house and on your gates, right? So when the people touched down, they said, look, we got to write these down because it's a commandment from God. All right. So from there, I want to get into, let's see if it still has it pulled up. No, it closed it. So let me open this up, see if it's still going to have it. Of course it's still here, but I want to see how long it's going to take to load and all that kind of stuff. If it takes too long, we might not even deal with it. But as you can see, this is a scan of an old book, The History of the American Indians by James Adair. All right, let's see how long this is going to take to pull it up. I had it pulled up, but it's being silly. All right, so as you can see by the pages, this is an old book, and see the copy that I have. It's newer than this. This is a scan of like one of the old ones. All right. The History of the American Indians. See, this is still written in like Old English. All right. Those nations adjoining to the Mississippi, East and West Florida, Georgia, South and North Carolina, and Virginia. Right. So this is before they even called it Alabama. It was just Mississippi and Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia. Right. So James Adair, this was written in 1775, by the way. This book came out before America did. All right. And I want to get down to something specific because we're not going to read through the whole book, but I want to get to some specific things just so people can understand what this is about. All right. So this says that he, lived amongst the people in these years, 1735 to 1744. All right. And then he went throughout different tribes and lived amongst them. All right. They have the table of contents. Let's get on into it. All right. So this is all about the observations on the color, shape, temper, and dress of the Indians of America. So that's how he starts off with his preface. All right. So the whole point of James Adair living amongst the American Indians was so that he could basically be a spy for the British. All right. That was essentially his aim. Some Europeans who came over here like maybe like William Penn just wanted to find out who these people were so that he could better know who he was living amongst. But specifically, James Adair was like a spy for the British. He would come through here and all these different Indians and figure out who they are. Reconnection was successful. Yeah, I'm gonna have to I might have to do something with the internet. It's looking like it's not trying to do it. That's all good. That's all fine and dandy. Let's see where we at. Are we back yet? It got some of it, but I can see that it cut me off. Let's see. It says we back up on the frame rate, so we're gonna stick to it. I know we dropped off at one point. All right. It looks like we still here though, so we're gonna get back at it. This is the people right here. His observations on the origin and descent of the Indians. All right. So let's jump down to page 12 in the book, page 24 on the PDF document. Now, I just found this document. You can look it up. You know, History of the American Indians by James Adair. There's an online PDF. I think it's from the internetarchive.org. I can't remember, but you'll find it if you look for it. All right. It said, some have supposed the Americans, he's talking about the American Indians, to be descendant from the Chinese, right? Because that's what they say about the Bering Strait theory. They said people from Asia came over here, and that's where all the tribes of the Indians come from. They had that theory back then in the 1700s as well. Some people said, oh, it was the Chinese coming over, and you had another group of people that was like, oh, that's Israelites that came over here. All right. It said, so he said, look, some people talking about they come from the Chinese, but neither their religion, laws, customs, etc. agree in the least with those of the Chinese. He said, look, these people don't act nothing like the Chinese. Their customs have nothing to do with what the Chinese be doing. All right. It's completely different. All right. Which sufficiently proves they are not of that line. He said, look, they can't be the lineage of China because they don't dress, they don't behave, they don't act, they don't worship like the Chinese. Nothing like them is similar to the Chinese. All right. Besides, as our best ships now are almost half a year in failing to China or from thence to Europe, it is very unlikely they should attempt such dangerous discoveries in early time with their supposed small vessels against rapid currents, right? Because that's what they say. They say, oh, well, the Bering Strait was like a land bridge at one point, and they chased elk over here. He said, look, with that early form, that primitive form of technology, there's no way they would have made it over here. The way that they say, oh, they ran over here in the Ice Age. That don't make no kind of sense. All right. You can believe it if you want to. It don't make no sense. All right. Rapid currents and then dark and sickly monsoons, especially as it is very probable they were unacquainted with the use of the lodestone to their direct course. China is above 8,000 miles distant from the American continent, which is twice as far as across the Atlantic Ocean. He said, look, just think about it. The Pacific is twice as far as the Atlantic. What is more likely, that they cross the Atlantic or that they cross the Pacific? All right. And we are not informed by any ancient writer of their maritime skill or so much as any inclination that way besides small coasting voyages. He said, look, they haven't those great shipping vessels it would require to cross the Pacific. All right. He said the winds blow likewise with little variation from east to west within the latitudes of 30 and odd north and south, and therefore they could not drive them on the American coast, it lying directly contrary to such course. He said, look, they would have to fight the course of the currents to get over here from China. All right. He said, look, there's no way possible. All right. So from there, let's jump around, because again, I'm not going to read all this. All right. Look, here we go. This is his point. He said, from the most exact observations I could make in the long time I traded among the Indian Americans, he said, look, I've been around these people, and what I found out, I could believe none other thing than what I found out. I was forced to believe them lineally descended from the Israelites. So notice he didn't say spiritual Israelites. He said these are literal lineage Israelites, either while they were a maritime power or soon after the general captivity. He said soon after the general captivity. That's when the Bible says the 10 tribes came over here. Soon after the general captivity. He said the latter, however, is most probable. He said, look, it's more likely that they came over here after that general captivity than they came when Solomon was at the height of his power. All right. And as we just read, from the days of Ezra, or I should say up until the days of Ezra, mankind had never dwelt over here. That's what we just read in the Bible. All right. This descent I shall endeavor to prove from their religious rites, civil and marital customs, their marriages, funeral ceremonies, manners, language, traditions, and a variety of particulars, which will at the same time, excuse me, them S's look like F's in the old style, which will at the same time make the writer thoroughly acquainted with nations of which it may be said to this day very little have been known. Right, so he goes into listing his evidence. All right, he said a number, come on now, there we go, a number of particulars present themselves in favor of a Jewish descent, but to form a true judgment and draw a solid conclusion, the following arguments must not be partially separated. Let them be distinctly considered, then unite them together and view their force collectively. You see that right there? And I'm not even going to get into all the arguments. I'm just going to touch a couple key things here at the beginning of the book. All right. He said, as the Israelites were divided into tribes and had chiefs over them, so the Indians divide themselves. Each tribe forms a little community within the nation. All right, so let me just prove that right there, because he said the Israelites divided themselves into tribes, into chiefs. All right. Now we know the 12 tribes, right? So Numbers 1 and 18. All right. It says, and they assembled all their congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward by their polls. All right. So then it goes into all the different families, all the tribes. All right. So let's go back up where it says every tribe. There we go. Verse 4. And with you there shall be a man of every tribe, everyone head of the house of his fathers. All right. So something here about the chiefs of the house of their fathers. All right. One second. About the Chiefs. Excuse me one second, John. Let's get back over here. All right. They had chiefs over them, the chiefs of their family. Let me just find that real quick so that I don't so that I can prove all things. I thought it was there in Numbers 1, but I was mistaken. So please forgive me. I know it's in the law where it said the chiefs of the house. No, chief of the house of their fathers. Come on now. There we go. Yeah, we get into Numbers. Numbers 4. Yeah, let's go Numbers 4. I thought it was in Numbers 1. Excuse me. It's actually in Numbers 4. That's where Numbers obviously is where we were chronicled. All right, originally. Numbers 4, towards the end. Numbers 4 and verse 46. Here we go. And verse 46, all those that were numbered of the Levites, whom Moses and Aaron and the chief of Israel numbered, after their families, after the house of their fathers. There we go. All right. So we see right there that the chief of Israel. So that would be a chief of each family, right? So that's what that's what he's talking about when he said divisions by tribes and chiefs. All right. So let's get back at it. All right. So, as the Israelites were divided into tribes and had chiefs over them, so the Indians divide themselves. Each tribe forms a little community within the nation. And as the nation hath its particular symbol, so hath each tribe the badge from which it is denominated, right? So you have the seals of each tribe, right? According to your Genesis 49 and your Deuteronomy 33. You have... like, for example, the seal of Judah is a lion, right? The seal of Gad is a troop, sometimes as a tent, sometimes as a man on horseback, right? The seal of Simeon is a saber or a sword, right? So that's just for an example. The symbol for Issachar is a burro or a donkey, right? So that's just for example. The sachem of each tribe is a necessary party in conveyances and treaties, to which he affixes the mark of his tribe as a corporation with us doth their public seal. If we go from nation to nation among them, we shall not find one who doth not lineally distinguish himself by his respective family. The genealogical names which they assume are derived either from the names of those animals whereof the cherubim are laid in Revelation to be compounded, or from such creatures as are most familiar to them. And here we have the different symbols, right? They have the families of the eagle, panther, tiger, and buffalo, the family of the bear, deer, raccoon, tortoise, snake, fish, and likewise of the wind, right? So it goes into how a lot of what the North American Indians did, a lot of what the Gadites did was mimicking or rather showing descent from and even representing the things that were already written in the scriptures, right? So it may not be like, for example, as he started listing the families, how they would be like the bear clan or the turtle clan or things like that. You're not going to see those specific clans in the scriptures, but it's of the same thing. Whereas like Dan was represented by a serpent, right? So it's like all these different, like Naphtali was represented by a hind or a deer, right? So like all these different tribes had their own seals, right? So you had Gad doing the same thing. All right. So I'm going to jump down to here we go. I'm going to jump to there is no tribe or individual among them, however, called by the name Opossum, which is with the Cherokee styled Sequoia, and with the Chickasaw and Choctaw Indians Shuka, synonymous with that of a hog, right? So they didn't associate themselves with the opossum, with the possum, because it was unclean. They viewed it the same as a hog, as a boar, all right? This may be more material than at first appears, as our natural histories tell us that the opossum is common in other parts of the world. Several of the old Indians assure us they formerly reckoned it as filthy, uneatable an animal as a hog, although they confess, and we know by long observation, that from the time our traders settled among them, they are every year more corrupt in their morals. You see that right there? So each year, he said, James Adair said, look, I've noticed that each year they stray further and further away from their God. And that leads us to where we are today. Not any of us remembering who we are, and not even really on any of the old customs, right? And you have like Gadites on reservations. They may do the powwow. They may wear a garment, but they don't know why the garment has fringes and a border of blue. They don't know why. Come on now. They don't know why they even having a feast in the first place, right? They don't remember the festival days, right? So each year And they noticed this in the 1700s, that each year we were further and further away from God. All right. Not only in this instance of eating an impure animal, but in many other religious customs of their forefathers. You see that right there? In many other religious customs, we stray further and further away from God. All right. So let's jump down to this paragraph right here. When we consider the various revolutions these unlettered savages are likely to have undergone among themselves through a long forgotten measure of time, and that probably they have been above 20 centuries without the use of letters to convey down their traditions, it cannot be reasonably expected they should still retain the identical names of their primogenial tribes, their main customs corresponding with those of the Israelites, sufficiently clears the subject. He said, look, as they have strayed further away from God, and obviously he says this in a hateful way because he's there to spy on the people so that the British can come overtake them. He's saying, look, we can't expect them to retain everything about their customs because they haven't got the actual Bible here with them. They don't have the written records here with them. All right. But he said, look, the customs are still similar enough. All right. Besides, as hath been hinted, they call some of their tribes by the names of the cherubical figures that were carried on the four principal standards of Israel. All right. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. I don't want to dwell on this too much. All right. So argument 2. He says, by a strict permanent divine precept, the Hebrew nation were ordered to worship at Jerusalem Jehovah, the true and living God, who by the Indians is stilted Yohewah. All right. So Yohewah is like the Yohewah, right? That's Yohewahe is like the actual letters that spell out Yahweh, or as they say, Yohewah. Same thing as Jehovah, same thing as the Lord that you read in the Bible, all right? Which the 72 interpreters, either from ignorance or superstition, have translated Adonai, right? So he's going into the name here, and Adonai is a different name. Adonai is like Lord God. When you see it in the Bible as Lord God as one thing, that's Adonai. And this is the very same as the Greek kurios, signifying sir, lord, or master, which is commonly applied to earthly potentates without the least signification of or relation to that most great and awful name, which describes the divine essence, who naturally and necessarily exists of himself without beginning or end. So again, he's like one of them yayas saying, you got to say the name and all this. The ancient heathens, it is well known, worshipped a plurality of gods which they formed to themselves according to their own liking, as various as the countries they inhabited, and as numerous with some as the days of the year. But these Indian Americans paid their religious devoir to Loach Ishtabol Abba, the great beneficent supreme Holy Spirit of fire. And that may not even be a proper translation there, because in the Hebrew, Abba is father, right? So the Loach Ishtabol Abba is like the father of spirits, the creator, who resides, as they think, above the clouds and on earth, also with unpolluted people, right? So he's saying, like, even at that time in the 1700s, the Indians were not worshiping a whole bunch of gods. They worshiped one God who lived with the unpolluted people, who walked with the righteous, in other words. All right. He is with them, the sole author of warmth, light, and of all animal and vegetable life. They do not pay the least perceivable adoration to images or to dead persons, neither to the celestial luminaries, nor evil spirits, nor any created being whatsoever. He said, look, they don't worship a whole bunch of gods like what the heathen do. They worship one God. All right. They are utter strangers to all the gestures practiced by the pagans in their religious rites. They kiss no idols, nor if they were placed out of their reach would they kiss their hands in token of reverence and a willing obedience. All right, it says the ceremonies of the Indians and their religious worship are more after the Mosaic institution than of pagan imitation, which could not be if the majority of the old natives were of heathenish descent. He said, look, they're doing more of the law of Moses than they are heathen customs. All right. For all bigots and enthusiasts will fight to death for the very shadow of their superstitious worship, when they have even lost all the substance. There yet remain so many marks as to enable us to trace the Hebrew extraction and rites through all the various nations of Indians. He said, look, all that I met down here in the southeastern United States, all that I've met are doing the same Mosaic customs. All right. They're not doing things that the heathen do. They're doing things that are more similar to what the law says. All right. And we may, with a great deal of probability, conclude that if any heathens accompanied them to the American world or were settled in it before them, they became proselytes of justice, and their pagan rites and customs were swallowed up in the Jewish. So that's again, something that I say often. If there's any, if the Israelites go anywhere where there are other people, or if other people are the mixed multitude are coming with the Israelites, they get absorbed by the Israelites, man. The Israelite seed will always overcome, and we see that in Hosea. But that's not what we're going into tonight, because it was all Israelites that came over here. It wasn't a whole bunch of different people. But he's saying, look, if there was heathen at some point, then they got swallowed up with the Israelites that were here. All right. So we're not going to read into this any further. Again, check it out. The History of the American Indians by James Adair. He goes into these things. He goes into specifically Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Shawnee, all these different peoples, man. The Creek peoples, I believe, as well. All right. So with that, let's get back to the Bible. All right, let's get back to the Bible. So why is it that we saw specifically him talking about the North American Indians, about how they were the ones who retained a lot of the religious customs that you read about in the Bible? How come they were the ones who held to like the Ten Commandments written on the Los Lunas stone? How come that was in North America and not found in Brazil? All right, Deuteronomy 33. Let's get it. Deuteronomy 33. And you read in Genesis 49 and Deuteronomy 33 is what tells you who is where as far as the tribes. Tell you which tribes went where. All right. Deuteronomy 33. I'm going to jump down to Gad. All right. Verse 20. And of Gad, he said, blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. You see that right there? So when we say Gad is all the North American Indians and First Nations up in Canada, all right, except for the Creek family, that would be the Reubenites. We say, oh, people may say, oh, why is Gad all the North American tribes? It's because blessed is the Lord, he enlargeth Gad, all right. He dwelleth as a lion and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. You see that Gad was very fierce in battle, all right, and he teareth the arm with the crown of the head. That's the blood brother pact. They made specific mention of his crown, because the crown of the Gadites was feathers. It was different than the crowns of the other tribes who had like gold crowns and things like that. All right. It said, verse 21, and he provided the first part for himself. You see that right there? He provided the first part, meaning the best part, for himself. Because there, in a portion of the lawgiver was he seated. See, Gad retained the laws of God longer than the rest of the tribes did over here in the West. That's why Gad really didn't fall. There was parts of Gad in the West that didn't even fall until like the early 1900s, and a lot of them they still haven't fallen. If you go there, they of course they're in subjection to America, but they're still over there. They're not wiped out like they were over here in the East. All right, they're still over there in the West. You know, here in the East, they were pushed onto the Trail of Tears and forced to scatter around. In the West, that wasn't so. You meet a lot of them out there in the West if you go there. All right, a place like New Mexico and Arizona, and even in parts of like Colorado. All right, and Nevada, but Utah, you know, that whole region out there. All right. It said, because there in a portion of the lawgiver was he seated. And again, the first part for himself, the best part. America is the best part of the West. I don't know if y'all noticed that. There's a reason why America has persisted, because it's the best land. All right, so Gad provided the best part for himself. And a portion of a lawgiver was he seated, and he came with the heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel. You see that right there. So that's why when James Adair studied the North American Indians, he said, look, these people still doing Moses' law. These people still, it's corrupted. They're not all the way right. They've fallen off each year. But I can tell that they, at one point, they was keeping Moses' law over here. All right, they had the Mosaic customs over here. All right, but when he said he came with the heads of the people was Ephraim and Manasseh. So let's jump up to 13. And of Joseph, he said, blessed of the Lord be his land. So that goes into like Cuba and Puerto Rico, very beautiful lands. All right. For the precious things of heaven, for the dew, and for the deep that coucheth beneath. The deep that coucheth beneath, if you look at a picture of Puerto Rico, a topographical map of Puerto Rico. I think I got it here in my pictures. Let's go to photos. It said the deep that couches beneath. Do I have it under D or under? That's the destruction of the Indies. No, it must be the deep that couches beneath Joseph. Let's see about the deep that couches beneath Joseph. The deep that couches beneath Joseph. I might be wrong. I might have it somewhere else. It might be under maps. Might be under maps. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Like I said, it might be under maps. Let me make sure. Do got a lot of maps. The deep, the couch beneath Joseph. No, maybe not. No, yeah, here it is, right here. So when it said the deep that couches beneath Joseph, excuse me. So you see here how up here north of Puerto Rico, you got pretty gradual, shallow. It gets pretty deep up here, but it's mainly shallow up above. This is Puerto Rico. North of Puerto Rico, it's pretty shallow. Then you go south of Puerto Rico, it just drops off. It just drops off into deep waters. All right. That's the deep that couches beneath Joseph. All right. That's the deep that couches beneath. All right. And for the precious things, or excuse me, for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and the precious things put forth by the moon. Right? Beautiful fruits, beautiful land in Puerto Rico and Cuba, and they got like the singing tree frogs. They got the nocturnal animals that come out at night. Wonderful things in these lands. All right. And for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills, right? And there have even been Hebrew artifacts found in the mountains of Puerto Rico. Maybe that's a story for another time. Maybe that's a lesson for another time, but they have found those things. All right. Verse 16, and for the precious things of the earth and the fullness thereof, and for the good will of him that dwelt in the bush, right? So that's the Lord, right? That's Christ. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph and upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. So God said, look, I'm going to bless Joseph in ways people don't even understand. Verse 17, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. You see that right there? So that's why Ephraim is sometimes represented by a unicorn. In this case would be like a rhino. All right. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. There we go. With them, again, that goes back to the Gad where he said he came with the heads of the people. Ephraim and Manasseh was the ones that were driving the people over here. They're the ones who initiated that council, and Gad was right there with them. All right. And they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. All right. So we're not going to get into all if you want to know more about the 12 tribe breakdown, we did a lesson on it. You have to go back. It might be in the deep basics, maybe not. I think it is though, on the YouTube channel, on the deep basics, under deep basics, under breakdowns. I think it's also there. But the point is, the people that came over here were the Israelites. All right, are the Israelites. All right, it's time to wake up and repent. All right, we can't come back to God unless we bethink ourselves and repent. All right, bethink themselves meaning remember who we are. We are God's people. It's time to come back to Him.